Hello and welcome back humans, birds, and fellow lizards. Sit back, find somewhere comfortable, and pretend you enjoy listening to a text-to-speech device give voice to my thoughts on the writing process. This channel continues to provide no writing advice. For this week, I am going to talk about something I feel does not get enough attention anymore, fantasy in the small scale. When someone mentions the fantasy genre, most people immediately think of large-scale, sprawling epics. Story worlds with a cast list in the dozens or even hundreds. There is an ominous and powerful threat, one with enough power and reach to threaten countries, continents, or the entire setting itself. There might be a number of complex and interlocking subplots that reveal the many political threads and narrative arcs at play. Events are larger than life in the sense that they all play out as a piece of a greater whole. Pawns in a grand game. And I want to clarify that there is nothing wrong with this. There will always be room in literature, movies, anime, and other media for narratives of this nature. Stories of an epic scale can be incredibly satisfying if done well and have a sense of grandeur and scope that is unique to the plots that operate at that level. However, what I am saying is that while I love reading the big ideas and the big things, on embracing grand epic stories, I have over the years grown to love writing fantasy on a small scale. Growing up, my earliest exposure to the fantasy genre was not The Lord of the Rings. It was not the legends and stories of King Arthur. I did not grow up to the lore and mythos of Warcraft, though I did come play the early games in the series. My first exposure to fantasy was Conan the Barbarian. It was a long list of badly dubbed Hong Kong kung fu movies. Fantasy took root in my mind not as something on an epic scale, but something small and local and even petty. Something where the stakes were low, but had personal meaning to the characters involved in them. For my formative years, the perception was that science fiction was grand and epic in the vein of Dune or the Foundation series, but fantasy was boots on the ground and dirty. And to an extent, that is what I enjoy writing in fantasy. I enjoy making sprawling worlds to varying degrees of detail, filling out a mental world map one place at a time. And then I try to populate it not with big threats like ominous dark lords or malignant gods or primordial forces of destruction, but with small people. A priestess who just wants to tend to the shrine she calls home. A young lady who doesn't want to return to her childhood home. A soldier making friends over a cold winter. A fighter who sold his principles a long time ago. A girl who wants to find a cure for her twin. These are not earth-shattering stories. They are not narratives that tie into the grand scheme of things or a high-level political game. They're just ordinary people doing ordinary things, with extraordinary and fantastic details going on around them or in the background. Many times, I find myself wondering why this style of fantasy seems harder to find these days. And some days, I wonder if it has always been hard to find. Just ordinary people in an extraordinary world. I can find stories about people and plots on a small scale for fantasy and its many subgenres, but they seem dwarfed by the stories that are more epic in scope. And I find that to be unfortunate, as someone who likes fantasy on a small scale. I feel more invested in such stories. This preference is why I write the stories I do. Even with the cosmic scale of the ritual involved in the novel A Journey, A Dancer, A Spirit, I made an effort to focus on the much more personal story that unfolded for the main perspective character, Dawn. The ritual itself, with its cosmic importance and mythological quality, was not something I focused on. I like to think that I succeeded in that regard. The other stories I've written, published, or otherwise, dwell more on personal matters or where the stakes are irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, even if they are all important to the characters themselves. I suspect that this mindset is partly tied to my dislike of being thrust into a wide-open world in a video game right from the start. In both instances, I am expected to engage and immerse myself in something I have not been given a reason to care about. In games, I prefer to have the world open itself up to me slowly. I want the players and set pieces revealed to me little by little, as I make progress through the game's narrative. In this manner and with good writing, I form a connection with the story world. I gain an appreciation for it and the people in it, in the places ruined and lives lost should I fail in the inevitable epic quest that must be tackled at the end. All too often, I find games with immediately open worlds just do not offer me enough reason to care to explore it. The same holds true of writing epics. Try as I might, I never give myself enough reason to care. Of course, I am aware of methods to give readers something to care about even in a grand story with an ominous but abstract threat looming over everything. One method I know of is to establish the stakes by giving a detailed and memorable introduction to what would be lost in the event of failure, as in The Lord of the Rings and its opening with the idyllic life in the Shire. Another method is seen in Avengers: Endgame, which relies more heavily on the personal conflicts of the narrative over focusing on the greater goal of saving the world. In both cases, I think there is a reliance on establishing what matters to the characters personally over a focus on a more abstract objective that may not be easy for the reader to fully grasp. I have attempted epic stories before. Or science fiction that is similar in scale. I completed one and lost track of the other due to various unrelated difficulties. The fantasy one I didn't care for by the end, and only creative inertia pushed me to finish it before archiving it so no one would ever read it. The science fiction one was terrible anyway, but I do value it for being a collection of interesting ideas even if they didn't all blend together into something I would be interested in writing. In both instances, I did not find the process enjoyable. And unable to give myself a satisfactory answer for why I should keep trying, I resolved to not make further attempts until I found one. This has, in turn, led me to my present focus on smaller, more personal stories. I find them easier for me to get into and enjoy writing. I also enjoy the way they let me zoom in and provide a glimpse of what daily life is like in a fantasy world and how, even with strange and magical elements, the issues people face can still mirror the perils of the real world. Perhaps one day I will try my hand again at some grand epic story where the universe itself is in peril and its future is in the hands of a demonic demigod looking to get into the family business, a time-displaced super soldier from an interstellar empire who wants to go home, an artificial intelligence devoted to achieving spiritual transcendence through enacting violence, an elegant but egotistical telekinetic, and the adventurer archaeologist that is trying to hold this all together. Or maybe I won't. I am unable to say for sure at this time. If you take away one thing from this rant, it is that while there are ways to make an epic storyline great, I do not enjoy writing them. And that if there is a lot more small-scale fantasy out there, I would very much enjoy being pointed in its general direction in the comments. As long as it does not involve a hard magic system, but that is a rant for another time. Now, do consider liking or subscribing while you are here. Or you can check the description for links to my novels, which you might enjoy. As always, thank you for your time and mind the lizard.